David Broonzy here in an episode of Chordplay, and this is Blues Guitar Chords, and I've had this idea on the back burner for a while, and now I'm finally putting this together. But blues music is very essential. It's very important. You know, it's the foundation of pretty much all forms of popular music. Pop and rock and jazz and funk, R&B, soul, country, folk. I mean, you name it. You know, blues has directly influenced, lots of styles of music. It's essential. And, depending on what era of blues, there are different, genres and subgenres. You've got the pre-war era, the post-war era, and the war was World War II, of course. Blues was noticeably very different before World War II compared to after World War II. And depending on where you are, in the world, if you're in America or in Europe or, Japan, Australia, wherever you are, there are different kind of versions or forms of blues, and it originated in the United States. And here's an image kind of helping you see like where it came from, whether it's Delta blues, Chicago blues, it could be the West Coast or Texas blues or whatever. So we're just going to dive right in. There's no need to discuss, a couple hundred years of blues history. You can definitely read and research, a lot of the origin and the early years and the changes, within blues. But definitely, blues music, not to mention a lot of rock and country and folk and other styles of music too. But it revolves around the 1-4-5, chord progression, the first, fourth, and fifth chords in whatever key you're in. So to help you understand, just in case you don't know what that means, here's an image kind of showing you like where we're grabbing the first, fourth, and fifth notes or, chords in a key. So as you can see from that image, I chose the key of A just to keep everything very simple. And I also wrote that in A minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, with no sharps or flats. So the first, note, or the 1 is A, the 4 is D, and the 5 is E. And if we just keep, things with single notes for right now, before we start changing the chords, we could use a really common, bass guitar line, which guitarists, blues guitarists started to actually do this on guitar too, because it sounds good. And it's loosely based around A7. So we've got the octave, 2 A's, the flat 7, which is that G, and then the E, which is the fifth of A. Really simple. But that's going to function as A. And then I want you to move over the next set of strings and then do the same thing in D. So there's your D octave, there's your flat 7 C, and there's the fifth of D, which is that A note right there. And then you're going to loop that. Go back to A. And then let's scoot up to E right here. There's your E octave. There's your flat 7 in the key of E, which is that D, and the fifth of E, which is that B right there. Go back to D, and back to A. So it's really basic. Think of One Way Out by the Allman Brothers, which that's a rock example, but a very famous, song. Same idea, basically A, D, and E, kind of using this little fragment, kind of, single note riff, but it's dancing around that tonality, A7, D7, and E7, even though we're not really playing chords, we're just playing single notes. And you could think of Jeff Beck's Rock My Plimsoll, for another example of this, which is on the Truth album, and that's in the key of B, but it kind of uses the same, basic idea. great song, and that's also using the same kind of idea, but in the key of B, so we kind of moved it to another position on the neck. And now we're going to start forming chords, and performing progressions, in a blues style. And it's really important to realize before we go any further, which is why I kind of, shied away from showing chords at the beginning, is mainly to explain the fact there's two different flavors of blues. And that's dominant blues and minor blues. And dominant blues would be, 7th chords. Think of A7 or A dominant 7. There's A7. And then you also have minor blues, which it's going to be A minor or A minor 7. Definitely two different worlds or flavors there. So you're not going to see a lot of major 7 in blues. That's definitely more of a jazz, kind of sound. But I don't want to say it's never used, because there are blues guitarists that use 7th chords. Think of somebody like Robin Ford or someone, where they're going to inject, these different flavors and bring in, some elements directly from jazz and kind of jazz up, blues. So in what we're going to be talking about here, we're going to stick with mainly the traditional, dominant blues and also the minor blues. But here's an image to kind of help you understand these two worlds or flavors. And then to push this even further, let's take the first image that I showed, with that A natural minor scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But let's change those to 7th chords, and I'm also going to show you this image, which is going to have those 7, keys, but also written and connected with the 1-4-5 progression, so you can see, what the 1-4-5 is in A or C or G or whatever key you're in. So check this out. For a song example at this point, we're going to look at a very basic, standard blues tune, Big Bill Broonzy's Key to the Highway, which Eric Clapton totally hijacked this song, and he's released it and recorded it, several times. It's on the Derek and the Dominoes album. There's a live album, Riding with the King, the album he made with B.B. King in the year 2000. So it's definitely been covered a lot. And this is really basic. So it's basically a blues in A. And we're also going to be using these really standard, 5th and 6th kind of boogie, blues riff like this. Very basic. So there's the 1 chord A. Chord E, and then the 4 chord, which is that D right there. 1, 5, and then 1, 4, 1, 5. Something like that. So check that song out. It's very, basic and primitive, but a great place to start if you're kind of getting used to, combining these chords and playing blues rhythms and riffs. Or if you're just a big Clapton fan, or maybe you're a big Bill Broonzy fan too. Okay, to continue here, we're going to basically do a blues guitar chord search now. And I'm going to unlock these really common and popular, guitar chord fingerings in blues. And we're going to outline, A, D, and E, the 1-4-5 we were just looking at. So we're going to start way down here in open position. And there's A7. There's another, fingering or voicing right here. Stevie Ray Vaughan, definitely like this one a lot. There's A7 right here. And of course you can relate that to the bar chord A7. But a lot of times, there are blues songs that feature, full bar chords like that, but it's kind of rare. Usually it's these little pieces and fragments of chords, used in blues, like that. There's another A7 right here. They're all over the place. So those are all different versions and forms of A and A7. Which you could, definitely stretch it way up here. You keep climbing, even higher if you want to. Get some of those really high, higher position chords. And then if you switch to D, there's D7 right here. And we got a D7 right there. Of course, we got the bar chord shape here. You got this little guy hiding right here. And they're all over the place. This one. And that one right there. And then you can flip to E and do E7 down here. There's another shape right there. And then we can move way up here. They're all over the place. There's the bar chord shape. Got this little guy. Bunch of them you can grab. Once you've kind of searched for chords, you can start to combine and mix them together and try to figure out, how you want to play the blues. And you could definitely grab, let's take this shape right here. There's A7. So you could definitely grab, one fingering and shift that around the fretboard, to play the 1, 4, 5. There's the 1, A7. There's the 4, D7. And the 5, E7. And I'm just using and recycling that same shape. But I'm also, it's forcing me to kind of move and shift around the fretboard. And you'll notice a lot of blues guitarists, some players, Stevie Ray Vaughan, didn't care. He would go from one position to another. But a lot of blues guitarists, especially if they're more traditional, they'll lock into a single position or a couple positions and not move a lot. Like you won't really see a lot of traditional blues players, moving all the way up like that. So what they might do is play something more like this. There's A7, and there's like a little fragment of D7 right there. You could also move back to like the bar chord if you wanted to, or just another, D7 that's kind of in the neighborhood right there, because there's your A7, there's an implied D7, like D7 over A, and then E right there, E7. So you can kind of find this little grouping or family, that lives together, like A7 here, D7 there, E7 here, and you can slowly start to kind of, figure out where those chords live and exist. And here's another blues standard that's going to kind of help you see, how we can group these chords together like I was just talking about. And this is the Stumble from Freddie King, and I love Freddie King. It's a classic song. The Stumble's something like this. Totally, playing the lead and rhythm at the same time, which is something I kind of worked on, over the years. But I mean, the rhythm itself, it doesn't actually do that, because I'm basically copying, Freddie's licks and the rhythm guitar, part. And you can definitely hear, the song if I do it that way. But if we just look at the chord progression, just the raw chords, it actually starts right there on the 4 chord. So we're starting, on A instead of E, because we're in the key of E right now. But we're starting on A. And that's where you hear that lick. That kind of opens the song. It starts with A, and then you hear it basically move to E. Right? And then you hear it move to A, and then back to E. Eventually you're going to hear it move to A, and then you're going to hear this flat 5 substitution. There's a B flat diminished creeping in, and then this is really crafty. So it's going to move to E, to C sharp 7, F sharp 7, and then B7. So there's a 1, 6, 2, 5, and definitely it's moving away from that 1, 4, 5 progression. So a lot of people think that blues is only a 1, 4, 5, and it's not, because blues, definitely the kind of cutting edge, envelope pushing blues musicians, they wanted something more than a 1, 4, 5. So they started to kind of borrow, progressions and habits from jazz and other styles of music. So I'm not really sure where Freddie, heard that progression. But that's really common in blues. So one more time there, we had basically the change that E, C sharp 7, F sharp 7, to B7. And also notice that they're all 7th chords, right? Which is really common in blues music. Instead of changing, to the actual, tonalities in the proper key, they're all just converted to 7th chords. Because that C sharp 7, technically, like in music theory standards, that's supposed to be C sharp minor 7. But to kind of keep that happy kind of bounce, it's just, converted to C sharp 7. The same thing with F sharp 7. Technically in the key, that's supposed to be F sharp minor 7 as far as the 2 chord. But here we're just changing it to 7ths, which is really common in blues. So one more time with this. Song. Okay, here's another song example, and it's actually using some of the chords we had in the chord search from earlier, but this is Buddy Guy's Mary Had a Little Lamb, a classic, blues standard. And Stevie Ray Vaughan famously, covered this on his Texas Flood, album, which I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I love Buddy Guy too, but this is super cool, like this. Something like that. We're, definitely flirting with chords and single note, riffs and different parts in there. But we're starting with this, kind of single note line. And then you're grabbing E7 right there and kind of getting funky with it. And that's tricky. And then it's going to move to A, the 4 chord. Interesting little fill right there. And then you're going to grab that A7 we had earlier. Back to that single note riff that started it. And then right there, we're basically moving to the 5 chord, that B7, but he's doing that kind of rapid, rapid picked, riff like that. And right there, you're kind of spelling out that B7. And then you've got this really standard kind of turnaround leg. One more time. And then you're going to basically do a reverse rate. It's really tricky. And it actually ends with this E7 sharp 9, the Hendrix chord. And then you repeat all that again. So one more time here, classic song. And now for something completely different. So this is a more recent, example, but this is Keb Mo and Perpetual Blues Machine, which is actually played on acoustic guitar. I'm just using my nylon string. But this is really interesting, and it's kind of showing you like a modern, variation of Delta blues, which is where it all started. But then to hear, Keb Mo kind of play a more contemporary version, it's so inspiring, like this. Something like that. So it actually starts with this. And it's kind of a variation of what we saw, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Buddy Guy doing in Mary Had a Little Lamb. But we're starting with this kind of shift, like that. And it actually ends with that low E open, which is kind of mimicking this. But he's not doing that. He's grabbing the low E right there before it changes to this D7 chord. And right there, that's technically going to be a D9 over F sharp, which is kind of the tonality right there. But he rolls into this little piece of D7 over F sharp. Grab that high E open, which is the 9. Grab the D to C. So really slow right there. It's going to move to A in this A6 kind of action. And then back to that D9 over F sharp. And then right there you're going to move up like this, kind of chromatically into this A, little partial A triad. Which is really interesting. Go back to that D9 over F sharp. And then you're hearing this. And there's the basic progression right there. So it kind of walked down, from that A to F sharp 7, and then B7 to E7, and then back to A. So once again, there's that 1-6-2-5, progression that we saw earlier. But now we're in, the key of A, and it's happening this way. So we're doing the 1. There's the 6. There's the 2. The 5 chord. And then back to 1. Really cool song. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with Blues Guitar Chords. And definitely, it was really challenging to kind of put this together because it's really hard to kind of sum up, a couple hundred years of blues, history, and then cram it into like a 20-minute lesson or video like this. So I had to kind of choose like what I wanted to show and the order and kind of sequence. And I mean, there's literally, like I said, a couple hundred years of information that you can kind of, work through, whether it's songs and concepts and turnarounds and licks and riffs and fills and all kinds of stuff. I mean, you can get lost in blues, for decades, if not, your entire life. And it's definitely a style of music I'm very, very fond of. I love blues music, but I also love rock and metal and funk and jazz and classical and a bunch of stuff too. But there's tons that you can learn, from blues. Phrasing and motifs and, less is more type of thing, very restrained, and not whipping it out, not shredding, not trying to impress people or being flashy. It's more that mood and that feeling and that energy and that kind of primal sound that you hear a lot of blues musicians tap into. It speaks to you, it really hits you when you hear it and it's played and sung or performed well. It'll stop you in your tracks, and then you'll turn it up or you'll listen to it and think, oh my gosh, this is powerful. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Nightlight Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.